Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this very exciting segment today with the live updates and the Daily India Report. Hey, it's good to be back. And don't forget that today at 10 a.m. we also have the real estate update with Usi Chandra. Once again, it's so wonderful to have your company on this 20th day of April. Well, April is just going away like anything. Well, right now in Brisbane, it's looking beautiful out there, sunny with 23 degrees. Well, that's a lot that's happening this weekend as well. As we know that Minister Alex Hawke is in town as well. On Friday, there is a multicultural gala dinner. And if anyone would like to be on that, please inbox me and you might get yourself a seat to come and see the minister at the Emporium Hotel being on my table. Well, right now, let's get on with the news. The airport debacles, and it triggers a blame game for Qantas.
It's been 10 days since Samantha Morris lost her luggage after flying Qantas for work.
I have no idea where my bags are.
Her frustration began when she volunteered to have her bags taken off an overweight flight.
Qantas has been quite a reliable airline, so I've never really thought about the risk of doing something like that.
Samantha says she regrets putting her trust in the national airline.
I tried to contact Qantas by telephone. I was on hold for more than 21 hours. I then filed 2 customer complaints to Qantas in writing. After that, I contacted the Airline Advocate, which is an ombudsman for the airline industry, and received a response from them telling me that my complaint was ineligible to be followed up by them because I hadn't yet had a response in writing from Qantas. My plan is to go and find a Qantas staff member, preferably someone that works in the baggage department, and ask them, what's going on.
Qantas woes surfaced 2 weeks ago when scenes of overcrowded airports and angry passengers were doing the rounds on social media. Qantas boss Alan Joyce blamed the situation on COVID, adding that passengers were out of practice with airport procedures.
I think our customers are not match fit.
Aviation expert Jeffrey Thomas says a combination of conditions created the perfect storm for the chaos.
You've got reports coming in of approximately 25 to 30% of staff calling in sick with COVID. On top of that, you've got a situation where literally hundreds of thousands of people want to travel over the holiday season.
On the front lines of customer frustration are Qantas employees. 730 has obtained screenshots of an internal Qantas discussion group where staff expressed grave concerns for the mental health of peers and said they're struggling to deal with angry customers after the domestic sales desk was recently closed for good.
We've had ground staff hiding on the flight deck because passengers are so angry and irate and they just can't take any more of that sort of projected anger.
Terry O'Toole runs the Flight Attendants Union after leaving her job as a Qantas flight attendant last year.
For 35 years, this was a company that I had absolute pride in. I think that what we've seen is just a general decision-making process from executive all the way down, whereby it's about the bottom dollar.
Qantas is under enormous cost pressure all the time from these new startups, these low-cost carriers. It doesn't take much for them to move from Qantas to a cheaper alternative.
Sack Alan Joyce!
When the pandemic brought the aviation industry to a standstill, Qantas outsourced 2,000 ground handling jobs. The Transport Workers Union fought that decision in the federal court. A judge found Qantas's decision to outsource was partly driven by the executive's desire to avoid union bargaining and industrial action.
We can't have companies pocketing the profits when times are good and then going cap in hand to governments when things get tough.
Qantas argued that the outsourcing was needed to save $100 million annually and has refused to reinstate the sacked workers.
I got my home loan refinanced, I bought an investment property, and then I was out of a job. You know, it was like the whole world came crashing on me.
Sammy Russo was among the 2,000 employees who lost their jobs.
15 years at Qantas, we never had this problem. I could turn up to work and I knew exactly how the day is going to go and what I need to do. You know, we had guidance, we had leadership, we had skilled workers.
He says the problems at Qantas started when the company got rid of experienced workers.
They've created the problem. We knew this was coming. It's a mess. And every time I see a commercial on TV, I have to laugh. I'm like, what a joke.
Well, you know, there's always the two sides of the story. So let's hear from Qantas and see what they had to say on this situation.
Andrew David, thanks for your time today. Qantas knew that it had staff shortages due to COVID, and you knew that airports were the same. You knew that Easter would be super busy. None of those things happened suddenly or unexpectedly. Why then weren't you better prepared?
We had prepared for the growth. It's hit us very quickly. End of last year, we were at 40% of our pre-COVID capacity in the domestic market. Over the Easter period, we're 100%. We did plan for it. We were aware of labour shortages in the market. We planned for those. What we can't plan for is the way that we've been hit with COVID absenteeism across our businesses. People are sick with COVID and people who are absent because they're close contacts. And that's hit us all over the place. Ground operations, security, our Jetstar pilots have been more impacted than our Qantas pilots. That we couldn't plan for. In one case, we had 50% of our workforce in one group in Melbourne absent one morning. You can't plan for those kinds of things, and that's what's hit us over this holiday period.
The Business Council says that workforces at some airports are 40% lower than pre-pandemic levels. Are there enough workers out there for Qantas and for airports to recruit, or does the federal government need to increase skilled migration so you can get on top of some of these issues?
Clearly, whatever the federal government can do to help with labour shortages more generally across the economy will be welcomed by all businesses in this country. For us specifically, we have planned. We've kept all the skilled workers, pilots, cabin crew, engineers, where we're ramping up in other jobs. We are finding we are getting those people. It does take time to recruit. We did allow for it. But as I said, the problem we've got is the way COVID's hitting our sickness and absenteeism levels, and that's the challenge we've currently got.
Qantas outsourced 2,000 ground handling jobs mid-pandemic. How can having a new workforce not be contributing to some of these headaches?
Well, it's not a new workforce because in 55 of the 65 airports, we'd already outsourced to all of these ground handlers over many, many years. So they were used to Qantas and they had the staff and they had the equipment. The decision that we made was to outsource the other 10 airports. And indeed, the performance from those ground handlers has been very good. If you look at last Easter, where we didn't have COVID rife in the community and our domestic capacity was back to 93%, the performance was very, very good. The difference this time round, when we're just over 100%, is we've got COVID in the community, and all of the ground handlers have been hit by that. So it has nothing to do with outsourcing and everything to do with the way COVID is impacting our workforce.
Regarding flight credits, it can be hard to find a time to rebook. A flight has to match what you spent originally. If you get on the phone, you're on the moment on hold for an hour or two. Why not simplify it so that you can just have rebook or immediate refund so that people can get their money back? Because if you haven't flown them anywhere, it is their money that you're hanging on to.
Well, exactly, Lee. We've refunded since the pandemic $1.8 billion in refunds. We're currently holding $1.4 billion in credits. An initiative we just put in place last week was to automate 80% of those that want a refund, where the booking is simple, we can do it quickly, and for that 80% we will get them a refund within 1 week, where currently it's anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, and at the worst case it actually blew out to 12 weeks. But for 80% it will be down to 1 week. The other 20% tend to be more complicated itineraries, where they've used part of the itinerary but not the rest, or it's with multiple airlines, or it's through a travel agent. And those are more complex for us to handle. Those ones we're still going to have to do offline. But 80% from this week onwards, they should be able to get a refund within 1 week.
Andrew David, thanks very much.
There you are. Now we've had both sides of the stories, and of course, as he mentioned, that it's nothing to do with the outsourcing and everything to do with the COVID and the number of employees, staying at home with the COVID conditions. So and that also put a lot of pressure on them. Well, right now let's move on and take a look at the campaign trail, and let's see what's happening on the campaign trail.
Waiting for this election contest to soar?
We want to see that.
Maybe wait a little longer.
Running out of battery. My opponent is running on fear and scare. He did that in 2019, and the truth is he got elected.
If he wants to talk about trust and integrity, then he should show some today.
The two leaders on opposite sides of the continent accusing the other of spreading lies and misinformation. The coalition using secret modelling to claim Labor's multi-billion-dollar upgrade of the electricity grid would increase power bills, not lower them.
The $78 billion, they're their numbers, not ours. That needs to be paid for by consumers.
These are dodgy numbers from a dodgy minister in a dodgy government.
What's going on here?
But Labor's got its own dodgy messages to defend. It's been claiming the government plans to put all age pensioners on the cashless welfare card.
It's degrading.
Labor's Julian Hill started peddling it in June last year. His evidence? This comment from the Social Services Minister more than 2 years ago.
Whether there is a conversation about the broadening of the use of the card.
How is it not a scare campaign?
Well, it's based upon the government's own policy.
Stop frightening pensioners. It is an out-and-out disgusting lie.
And it's not just the PM who's worried.
We also raised our concerns that this was starting to alarm pensioners without foundation with the Labor Party.
There we go. Oh, here we go.
The fact both campaigns have gone so negative so early might partly explain the latest news poll. Primary support for the two sides slipping. The coalition now on 35%, Labor just ahead after it also suffered a fall, a whopping 29% of respondents indicating they support a minor party or independent.
A vote for these independents at this next election is a vote for uncertainty and instability.
The Labor leader insisting he's the one to watch.
I've been underestimated my whole life.
News polls suggest that while voters appear ready and willing to dump the government, they're yet to be convinced by the Labor alternative. Anthony Albanese's stumbles last week wouldn't have helped the ALP, but neither side benefits when voters struggle to discern truth from fiction. Nothing's off limits for the mischief. Boats, borders, carbon tax, mining tax, Medicare, pensioners and power prices. And that's just in the first 9 days. Andrew Probyn, ABC.
Oh, just first 9 days, and it's going to get intense. And of course, there'll be name calling and everything on different sides of the country. Well, it will be interesting to see. Well, right now, let's take a look at this review where Federal Labor promises to review NDIS scheme.
Again.
I'm tired.
Life changed significantly for Penny Laylor after she had a stroke in 2020, making it difficult for her to speak. As her daughter explains, the former disability worker now requires full-time care.
She now has her own disability that we've been managing. She was in hospital for 8 months during COVID, which was a difficult time.
After waiting months for Penny's case to be assessed, she was awarded 5 hours a week care through the NDIS, a fraction of the 36 hours she was initially told to expect. She's now asking for that to be reviewed.
If we don't get what we need in the review, most of her care will be provided by family, which is going to cause a lot of issues.
Labor introduced the NDIS and isn't happy with the way it's now being managed.
It may be invisible to some people on top,
that for many Australians, it's literally a question of life or death.
The NDIS is for...
Bill Shorten says too much money is being wasted on external consultants. If Labor wins, he's promising a review of the $31 billion scheme, but won't say how much he expects to save.
What we'll do is stop the expensive carpetbagging consultants, the top end of town lawyers, growing rich on being paid taxpayer money.
Lobby group Every Australian Counts welcomes the pledge but wants to see the fine print and is urging the coalition to outline its plan for the scheme.
We need to defend the NDIS because when it works, it's amazing, and when it doesn't, it's a great tragedy for all of Australia.
The coalition has raised concerns about the sustainability of the NDIS, but it's made this pledge.
Under the coalition, the NDIS will always be fully funded.
The Minister for NDIS, Linda Reynolds, was not available for interview today, but she says the government is providing record levels of funding for disability services. She warns that Labor's pledge would be yet another review of the system and that this would add layers of bureaucracy for participants and providers. Elizabeth Wright, ABC News.
And as we move on, the scare campaigning is just getting up a notch.
If it's a Labor government supported by the Greens, that's bad news for the resources sector because the Greens want to shut the mining industry down.
My opponent is running on fear and scare.
Anthony Albanese is working away in the darkness there, trying to frighten pensioners at night.
During this term of this Parliament, this Minister said this: we're seeking to put all income management onto the universal platform, which is the cashless debit card.
Election campaigns are full of promises, mistakes and announcements. Sometimes our political leaders speak in positive terms about the future.
I love this country and I love Australians. And more than ever, I am optimistic about our future and what I know Australians can achieve.
My fellow Australians, this election will determine whether we can come together to build a better future.
But in the past couple of days, the political campaign has turned negative, very negative. That is, the combatants are telling us a lot about what's wrong with the other side instead of their plans for the country. The coalition, which is trying to make Labor the issue at the election, has been pretty negative from the start.
The Labor opposition, who Australians know can't be trusted to manage money, they know that they're unproven.
But under growing pressure, Labor has also been going increasingly negative as it seeks to turn the pressure back on the government's own record.
We have to act on climate change. Now, this government have had 22 separate policies on energy and climate, and they haven't landed a single one of them. What we saw from the federal government, whether it be bushfires, floods or the pandemic, is a real pattern of behaviour.
And by today, the campaign is starting to be dominated by scare campaigns. That's the claims made about your opponents based on little or no evidence. The government claims Labor has a plan for a secret retiree tax, plans for higher taxes generally, and a plan for pushing power prices up. For its part, Labor says the coalition has a secret plan to cut Medicare and that it wants to extend the cashless welfare card to aged pensioners.
Now, Anne Ruston has made it very clear that she wants to take the universal out of universal health care. She has made it very clear that if we have a re-election of the Morrison government, we will see more cuts to Medicare.
Well, I think the comments you're referring to were back in 2014. Our government has been absolutely clear that we are not...
And as I mentioned before, the scare campaign moves on and gets on. Well, right now for a slightly different news, let's take a look at what's been happening to the top end. And are the tourists heading to the top end or not?
The Easter Bunny wasn't the only visitor this weekend. 60,000 travellers went through Territory airports, making the most of the long weekend. The numbers reminiscent of a pre-pandemic world.
This was probably one of the best holiday seasons we've had in over 2 years. It was actually quite extraordinary.
After 2 years of very little income, it's great to see the season off to such a great start.
Accommodation fully booked out in Central Australia. The surge in holidaymakers, a welcome boost for business after the pandemic and skyrocketing petrol prices.
We've seen a number of regions that have had really strong events and strong numbers of tourists and locals getting out and about and supporting local business.
Plenty of tourists, but the same can't be said for staff. Operators struggling to keep up with demand, especially in hospitality.
Those were the positions that were primarily filled up with backpackers, and those guys are going to take a while to come back.
One of the bigger problems is that we've also lost a huge number of staff over this period, and to go from sort of 0 miles per hour to 100 miles per hour in a couple of weeks is very, very difficult for the operation.
With tourist season ahead, operators want the government to offer incentives to attract workers, addressing staff shortages to meet demand. Finally, leaving the pandemic downturn behind going into the dry season. Nivir Khan, ABC News.
As I mentioned, it is good news, and of course we saw the number of people going to Sydney as well, and all around the country, because people are not travelling overseas, so they are travelling locally, and that's good for the economy. Well, here's an eyewitness to that Sydney Easter show stabbing.
It was as chaotic as it was quick. A teenager killed in one of Sydney's biggest family events. But a week on and police still don't know who stabbed 17-year-old Uati Pele Falatolu.
It's not the time now to stay silent. If you know something, say something.
Authorities are urging witnesses to come forward with their mobile phone vision.
They may think it's inconsequential, but it could be incredibly important to us. And they may have captured, unknowingly or inadvertently, who is actually responsible for stabbing Pele.
Mr Falatolu worked for one of the Easter show ride operators when he was stabbed in the chest during a brawl between two groups last week. His mother paid tribute to her son on social media. "We are heartbroken. Uati was a happy, outgoing young man with a loving heart," adding, "We as a family do not want him to be remembered as a victim, but to use this time to honour and celebrate the beautiful person that he was."
We can't do our job without the community coming forward and helping us, and it's never been best exemplified than this current murder investigation.
A 15-year-old who allegedly possessed a knife at the scene remains before the courts. Police say he was not responsible for Uati's death. A 16-year-old boy also underwent treatment for a wound to his leg. Police say neither are cooperating with the investigation.
Whether that's through misguided loyalty or through whatever reason, that doesn't help us. That's disappointing and it's frustrating for the investigators involved. I'm sure it's also frustrating for the family.
Despite an extensive search at the scene and police spending hours scouring through the CCTV here at the Easter show, officers still haven't been able to locate the murder weapon. Uati Falatolu's funeral is on Friday. Police hope this appeal will help catch his killer. Cayman Gok.
And that is such a sad news, such a tragic news for one of the biggest the family events. Well, this kind of activity should be condoned, and it is just not on. And if anyone has any information, please as per that plea from the police, that if you have any footage or anything like that that might help, please come forward. All right, now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif responds to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with thanks for greetings and urges for peaceful resolution of all outstanding disputes, including Jammu and Kashmir. The newly elected Pakistan Prime Minister has said in his letter to Modi that Pakistan wants to reciprocate India's sentiments for peace. Shahbaz said, quote, "I wish to thank you for your greetings and good wishes on my assumption of office as the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Reciprocating your sentiments, I wish to convey that Pakistan remains committed to the maintenance of regional peace and security. Our sacrifices and contribution in fighting and eliminating terrorism are well known and globally acknowledged. We believe that peaceful and cooperative ties between Pakistan and India are imperative for the progress and socio-economic uplift of our people and for the region. This can be best achieved through meaningful engagement and peaceful resolution of all outstanding disputes, including the core issue of Jammu and Kashmir." End quote. The closeness of Modi and former Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif could be beneficial for the restoration of ties, but it is also no secret that Pakistan's foreign policy is dictated by the Pakistan Army and its spy agency, the Inter-Services Intelligence, and will continue to emphasize Kashmir as a disputed territory. Prime Minister Narendra Modi laid the foundation stone for WHO Global Centre for Traditional Medicine in Jamnagar, Gujarat on April 19th. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been on a 3-day visit to Gujarat to unveil multiple development projects. The Prime Minister visited the Command and Control Centre for Schools in Gandhinagar on April 18th. On April 19th, he was joined by WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus as the Prime Minister laid the foundation stone for WHO Global Centre for Traditional Medicine in Jamnagar. WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who landed in Gujarat's Rajkot on April 18th, thanked the Indian government for a warm welcome hours before he was set to attend key events with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his home state. Modi also dedicated to the nation a new dairy complex and potato processing plant at Deodar in Gujarat state's Banaskantha district, built at a cost of over 600 crore rupees. The new dairy complex is a greenfield project that will enable the processing of about 3 million litres of milk, produce about 80 tons of butter, 1 lakh litres of ice cream, 20 tons of condensed milk and 6 tons of chocolate daily. The potato processing plant will produce different types of processed potato products like French fries, potato chips, aloo tikki, patties, etc., many of which will be exported. These plants will empower the local farmers and give a boost to the rural economy in the region. COVID-19 cases in the Indian national capital Delhi and adjoining districts of Uttar Pradesh and Haryana have increased many folds during the last fortnight. Indian states of Haryana and Uttar Pradesh have reported a surge in COVID-19 cases. This has created fear among citizens of yet another wave that was predicted by health experts to hit India around June. On April 2nd, Delhi recorded a test positivity rate of 0.7% and 114 cases. This rate in Delhi alone has jumped from 0.7% on April 2nd to 5.33% on April 16th, with 461 cases, marking a 650% increase, indicating that COVID is back in Delhi and spreading rapidly. Amid a rise in COVID-19 cases in Haryana, the state government has decided to reiterate the mask mandate in several districts. Masks have now been made compulsory in Gurugram, Faridabad, Sonipat and Jhajjar districts, which fall in the NCR region. This has been done in view of the rise in COVID-19 cases in Haryana as well as in Delhi. The national capital has recorded over 500 fresh cases of coronavirus over the last 24 hours, with the daily positivity rate now standing at 7.72% on April 18th. Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh Yogi Adityanath has instructed authorities to monitor the situation and make masks compulsory in several districts including state capital Lucknow. Yogi said in some neighbouring states there is an increase in the cases of COVID. In the last 24 hours, 65 new positive patients have been confirmed in Gautam Budh Nagar, 20 in Ghaziabad and 10 in Lucknow. The situation in these areas should be closely monitored, he said. The CM said masks should be made mandatory in public places in NCR districts. In these districts, the people left out from vaccination should be identified and vaccinated. This comes just a few months after the third wave of the pandemic led by the fast-spreading Omicron variant subsided in India. The increase in cases has sparked speculations of a fourth wave of the pandemic hitting India soon. According to experts, it is possible that the number of cases will increase, but there will be no need for hospitalization or the patient become very serious. People should be made aware to follow the COVID protocol though. Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey is the 29th Chief of the Indian Army and will assume office on May 1st, 2022. Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey was on April 18th appointed as the 29th Chief of the Indian Army. He will assume the role on May 1st, a day after current Army Chief General M.M. Naravane is slated to retire. Pandey is the first officer from the Corps of Engineers to become the Chief of the Indian Army. Pandey was commissioned into the Corps of Engineers in December 1982. He was the commander of the Engineer Regiment during Operation Parakram, a large-scale mobilization of troops and weapons to India's western border following the December 2001 attack on the Indian Parliament. Pandey has also commanded an engineer brigade, an infantry brigade along the line of control, a mountain division in the Ladakh sector and a corps in the northeast. He was the commander-in-chief of the Andaman and Nicobar Command before he took charge of the Eastern Command. He became the Vice Chief of the Indian Army, succeeding Lieutenant General C.P. Mohanty in February. Pandey has also served as Chief Engineer in the United Nations peacekeeping missions in Ethiopia and Eritrea. Indian national carrier Air India has cancelled all flights to Hong Kong till April 24th after 3 passengers on Air India's flight were found COVID positive. Air India has cancelled flight services to Hong Kong due to COVID-19 restrictions imposed by the Hong Kong authorities and limited demand in the sector, the airline said. This is due to restrictions imposed by the Hong Kong authorities and limited demand on the sector. Hong Kong has banned Air India services till April 24th after 3 passengers on one of its flights tested positive for COVID-19 post-arrival on April 16th. All international passengers are required to take a post-flight COVID-19 test at the airport premises in Hong Kong. The 3 passengers on Air India's AI 316 Delhi-Kolkata Hong Kong flight on April 16 tested positive for COVID-19 post-arrival. Air India flights from New Delhi and Kolkata have been banned till April 24th by the Hong Kong government. Passengers from India can arrive in Hong Kong only if they have a COVID-19 negative certificate from a test done 48 hours prior to the journey, according to rules issued by the Hong Kong government. Driven by rising crude and commodity prices due to the Russia-Ukraine war, India's wholesale inflation rose to a 4-month high in March and is expected to rise further. India's wholesale inflation rose to a 4-month high in March 2022, largely driven by a surge in global crude oil and other commodity prices amid the Russia-Ukraine war. Wholesale price index based inflation, which has remained in double digits for a year now, is expected to surge higher. WPI inflation jumped to 14.55% in March from 13.11% in February, as per data released by the Commerce Ministry. Crude oil prices were the biggest contributor to the rise in WPI inflation in March. WPI inflation is expected to remain in the range of 13.5 to 15% in April, partly depending on where crude oil prices settle by the end of the month and how much petrol and diesel prices are revised further. Core inflation rose 2.2% sequentially in March, a fallout of the geopolitical tensions, with the inflation rate rising to 10.9%. Only 4 of the 21 subgroups of the core index escaped a month-on-month rise in March, namely beverages, other transport equipment, wearing apparel and pharmaceutical products. After a successful run at the box office, Vivek Agnihotri's The Kashmir Files is all set to premiere on the OTT platform. The Kashmir Files has emerged as one of the biggest blockbusters after the coronavirus pandemic. The film, released on March 11th in theatres, will soon be available on the OTT platform as well. Produced by Zee Studios and Tej Narayan Agarwal, Abhishek Agarwal, Pallavi Joshi and Vivek Ranjan Agnihotri, The Kashmir Files is written and directed by Vivek Agnihotri and features a stellar and talented cast of actors including Mithun Chakraborty, Anupam Kher, Darshan Kumar, Pallavi Joshi and Chinmay Mandelkar. The movie is based on video interviews of the first-generation victims of the exodus which took place in Kashmir in the 1990s. It's a heart-wrenching narrative of the pain, suffering, struggle and trauma of Kashmiri Pandits. The exodus.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in this segment. And of course, that Kashmir File has done exceptionally well. Well, right now, let's finish off today with the look at some of the functions and events taking place right here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your company today, and I hope you have enjoyed today's segment. Please do send us your reviews and your comments. We'd love to have a look at that and improve on whichever way we can. But once again, thank you so much, and I'd like to also place on record my special thanks to people who say, especially Devika Maharaj, and of course there are many groups on which the admins allow us to share our feed on those groups. Thank you very much, because look, this is for community. This is all the community-based news and of interest to everyone. As per our disclaimer in the very beginning that these news are sourced from publicly available domains on the web, but put together in a story format of what might be interest to you. So rather than you having to scrounge through the lot, it's a compilation of stories and news articles which is of interest to our community. So ladies and gentlemen, until the next segment, which will be the real estate update with Usha Chandra, back here at 10 a.m. It's goodbye from us.